So, like I was saying, you have the cat, you have the Toxoscaris eggs, which are passed in the cat's feces. Then you have the larvae developing inside of the egg, and then those are infesting your transport hosts. Now, we don't often see Toxocaris cati in humans. And the 3 roundworms that I have listed on the screen are actually more common in humans, and so I'm going to talk about them a little bit. The thing you have to understand about roundworms is their larvae are able to move. They go through a stage called the larval migrans stage, which means the larvae actually migrate or move. And this is extremely frightening when you think about the 3 that are on the screen. Ascaris is particularly frightening, and if you're wondering what Ascaris looks like, this is Ascaris. Now, if you look at your Chromebook and you look at the spacebar on your Chromebook and double that length, that is about how long that roundworm is. Ascaris infects the lungs, and it actually migrates to the lungs from the digestive system. So what happens is we digest the eggs, and then those eggs hatch inside of our digestive system. Those larvae then migrate through the blood vessels to get to the lungs. There they grow to the length you see on the screen, and then what they do is they kind of wiggle up to the bronchial tubes and release their eggs, causing their host to cough. And if the host doesn't cough and eject what they're coughing up, if they just swallow what they've coughed up, then they can reinfect themselves. And you can actually suffocate from having an infection of Ascaris worms. The next one is pinworms. You often see these in children. They're microscopic roundworms. They're very small. I'm sorry, not microscopic. Their larvae are microscopic. And these are really, really tiny little worms, and they live in the digestive system, but they migrate at bedtime to the anus of their host and then lay their eggs around the anus of their host. And you often see pinworm infections in young children, preschool-aged children. And the reason for that is what happens is they pick it up on the playground. You can often find pinworm infections in playground sand. And then they'll get pinworm, and then they'll feel this scratching feeling around their anus, and they'll scratch, but they won't wash their hands. And then they'll start touching their face, other kids' face, the face of their teachers, and infect people with pinworms by doing that, because they have the eggs on their fingers because the eggs are sticky. The interesting thing about pinworm is actually how it's diagnosed, which many of you may already know as the Scotch tape test. So before bedtime, Scotch tape is applied to the anus, and then in the morning that Scotch tape is checked to see if there are dead worms, because it acts as kind of like a sticky trap and prevents the worms from migrating back in after they've laid their eggs. And then you just take some antibiotics and you can be treated for pinworm, and it's pretty safe after that. Ascaris, again, you'll just take some antibiotics. Although if you have a really horrible infection, you may have to have them surgically removed. Hookworm is also an intestinal parasite, and what happens with hookworm is you often see it with night soil, which is another way of saying human fertilizer or human feces used as fertilizer. So human waste has hookworm eggs in it, and the larvae hatch from those eggs. And then if you have somebody walking around barefoot with this fertilizer, what happens is the hookworm actually burrows into the skin and migrates to the digestive system. So hookworm's particularly nasty because you have all the destruction of that tissue as it migrates to your digestive system. And then it latches into the lining of the digestive system, breaks open blood vessels, and then sucks the blood from those blood vessels. So generally what you'll see with hookworm is you'll see a lot of blood in the feces. That can look and blood in the feces, depending on how old it is. Either if it's really close to the anus, it will be bright red. But if it's farther up in the digestive system, which is what you would see with hookworm, it's actually going to be black and tarry. So that is the end of our notes for roundworm. And I will end it there. And the next thing we're going to talk about is the small intestine.